Hello and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all are fit and healthy. Welcome back to English with Aisha Siddiqui. I am doing the second year BA students portion and I'm doing the subject of special English. I hope you all are, taking all the precautions as the night curfew has already started. And I don't know why it is the night curfew as maybe because in Christmas people do not, Christmas and New Year's we do not go outside and mingle a lot so that the virus can spread. Maybe because of that, we should take it positively and think that it will benefit us, right? So of course it will benefit us if we are not going in the crowd. We will be saved from this deadly virus that has taken over the globe. So, yes, stay little connected with the people. Of course, it's Christmas and New Year. We want to meet our friends and families, go out for dinners and all. But we can take all the precautions and come back early as possible. So, let's start with the portion. And I want the theory of poetry, wherein we had started a very vast topic of metaphysical conceit. And I have started already. I've started the topic and have covered half of it. So today we'll be doing the other half of the poetry, and I'm sharing my screen for you all here. So the introduction part, I'll just quickly, for the people who have not seen it, I'll just quickly recap what we did in the previous video. And for detailing, please go back to the previous video and see the video as well. So we've done the introduction. We've seen the poets' views on metaphysical poetry. There were two poets, Dante and Grigerson. Then what were the main features, types, and themes of metaphysical poetry? Now we'll be doing the beginning of metaphysical poetry that was in the Jacobean period, and we already did the last stage of Shakespeare. I mean, it was the last stage of Shakespeare period that got over. John Donne was the most famous poet who started the metaphysical poetry. Now let's see the different critic views of the poets. Dryden and Johnson, being new classical critic, use this term metaphysical in a negative sense. Now let's see why did they use it in a negative sense. Johnson says the most heterogeneous idea are yoked by violence together. So he thought that this can bring a devastating state or maybe a violence around the people. So he thought it in a negative way. But Thomas Stearns Eliot gives this term metaphysical a place of honor. So the other poet, that is Thomas Eliot, he actually gave honor to metaphysical poetry. He appreciated the metaphysical poetry. Let's see the poets who wrote metaphysical poetries. John Donne, and the year from when he started till when he died. Then Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, Richard Crashaw, Henry Vaughan, George Herbert, Lord Herbert, Abraham Cowley, Andrew Marvell, Edmund Waller. Now, these were the different poets who wrote metaphysical poetry. We should remember their names. From these, there is only one that we are going to learn the poetry of is John Donne, The Sun Rising by John Donne. We are going to do it in the book coming further. Let's see about John Donne and what metaphysical poetries he wrote. John Donne was the leader and founder of the metaphysical school of poetry. So he actually found the metaphysical school. He started the metaphysical school of poetry. John Donne's poetry is intellectual in nature. So too much of intellectual brain is used in his poetries. It is replete with witty conceits. So too much clever and witty ideas are there in it. It is full of imagery, dramatic events, directness of speech, and harsh rhythm. So too much of directness. So he took metaphysical poetry in a more stronger way, that is more harsher way, harsher speech, direct speech. All these things were used, so he took it in a more harsher way, you can say. His best known works are The Progress of the Soul and an anatomy of the world, and elegy. That's an elegy. Elegy is a type of poetry. For the people who have not seen types of poetry, I have made a video on the types of poetry so that you all can know what are the different types of poetry. So please go back to my videos and watch the different videos or the different types of videos. Sorry, the different types of poetry. And epithalamion. So this is also a different type of poetry. So I'm sorry, I stopped the screen sharing. I'll just go back to it. Yeah, yeah. So Don's poetry is categorized by intellect, in which emotions are fused. So intelligence, logic, and emotions were fused together. Don passionately feels a thought and experiences intensely. That is why T.S. Eliot says, although to Don was an experience, it modified his sensibility. Now, combination of thought and feeling. Now, sometimes there are so many different types of people, right? All have different abilities and different types of behavior, right? Some are very practical type of people. They do not want so much of emotions and drama. Some are very emotional type of people. They do not fall into more logical thinking and all. So these two people are mostly opposites, right? And they mostly are like we can say North Pole and South Pole, because to have feelings and emotions and a little bit of drama and to have logic is just the opposite things. But how did John Donne combine both the personalities and behaviors together for his poetry? Even the thoughts, I mean emotions and all, and also logic. Sorry, thoughts and emotions together, logic and emotions together. Let's see. Metaphysical poetry is a blend of passion of and thought. T.S. Eliot thinks that passionate thinking is the chief mark of metaphysical poetry. So you should have that passion for the poetry. There is an intellectual analysis of emotions in Don's poetry. So, too much of emotional connect is there. Though every lyric arises out of some emotional situation, the emotion is not merely expressed, rather, it is analyzed. So, expressing something and analyzing are two different things. Express is just to speak out, analyze it to speak out. Why did you speak? How did it happen? What's the past? What is the reason behind it? It's too much of analyzing. So analyzing means too much of going into the depth. Then Don's poem, a valediction, forbidding mourning, proves that lovers need not mourn at parting. For instance, so what does it mean? He's written a poetry so that it proves that lovers need not mourn. Means normally people who love each other, they whenever they are separating from each other, they start crying, right? So he's saying that it's not required that much in his poetry and how it can happen. So let us melt and make no noise. No tears flood, no sigh tempest move. Tear, profanation of our joys, to tell the laity our love. He says that we can melt inside, our emotions are melting inside, or you can say it's boiling and therefore it's melting, and still we are making no sound. Sometimes it happens, right? From inside, we're so weak, we're almost crying, but on our outer side, we are tears are not rolling actually, but we are very emotional. That is the point he wants to put. That from outside you look a little stronger, but inside you are actually broken. And you can even sometimes show joy or smile to each other when we are very sad inside. That is the reality of metaphysical poetry. The major quality of metaphysical poetry is the combination of thought and feelings. And Dawn is the master of presenting together the different objects which have a remote similarity between them. He connects the abstract with concrete. So what he cannot see, that is emotions, with concrete, that means with the physical feelings, the physical world and all the emotions. The remote with the near and the physical with commonplace. In the sun rising, Dawn considers his beloved the center of the universe. Now, the sun rising is the topic, is the poetry that we are going to do in this book, in the coming poetries by John Donne. It's the third poetry in line. So we are going to do this poetry further. So understand what is here. It is a metaphysical poetry that we are going to do. The sun rising is a metaphysical poetry where he thinks that his beloved, the one who he loves, is in the center of universe. Means nothing is more important that I mean that person is the most important. This feeling is conveyed by making the sun revolve round their room. So in this poetry, once we do that poetry later on, it is said that the sun is revolving around the moon. That means his beloved is in the center of the universe, so important for him. Shine here to us, and thou art everywhere. This bed thy center is, these walls thy sphere. That means he's saying that this bed is the center of the universe, the bed where his beloved is, and the walls that are of his room is just like a sphere, that's the earth, the universe. In Dawn's metaphysical poetry, emotions are shaped by logical reasoning. According to Grigerson, in metaphysical poetry, exhibited deductive reasoning carried to a high pitch. Don's poetry expresses his extensive learning. Too much of logic and all is there in it. So, too much of learning, extensive learning. He was well versed in medieval sciences. So, he has also studied medieval sciences, and therefore, he also applies logic to his poetries. Logic, theology, law, and medicines were at his command. So, he has done all of this. And therefore, he has put all of this like combination together in the poetry. His mobile imagination could draw images from almost every field. So mobile means he's very versatile. He knows about law, he knows about medicine, he knows about logic and theology. So therefore, from everywhere he collects and combines all these theories and imaginations and puts it into poetry. Metaphysical conceits. Now comes the main topic, that is metaphysical conceit. Fondness, sorry, fondness of conceits is one of major characteristics of metaphysical poetry. So, metaphysical conceit is a characteristic of the poetry. Dawn makes use of the daring imagery and metaphysical conceits. So John Donne has too much of daring to put all these combinations together. His wit, his theologies, his law, his medicine, and his conceits show his deep learning in all the fields that he's done. The range of his imagination is quite vast. He compares his face and the face of his beloved with two hemispheres, which make a globe, but the world they build together is superior to the earthly globe. So important. Now he's done theology and universal studies and all. So that is why he actually compares the two faces just like two different hemisphere, northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. So he's done these two subjects, and therefore he combines these two theologies together for his poetry, just to explain that how much love he has for his beloved, about his two faces and the two hemispheres coming together. And even the love between those two, I mean him and his beloved, is so superior, more superior than the whole universe and the globe. In Good Morrow, he says, now this is another poetry of John Donne, that is Good Morrow. He says that my face is thine eye, thine is mine appears. Where can we find two better hemispheres? Again, he's talking about the face and the two hemispheres here. John often uses fantastic comparisons. So, anything that a person wants to explain, if he explains with the help of a example, it's the most understood by the people, right? And it's very easier to understand. And John Donne was a poet. In his poetry, he gave examples to explain what he wants to say. What logic and what emotions is there behind that poetry is explained to fantastic comparisons and examples that he's given. The most striking and famous one used by John Donne is the comparison of a man who travels and his beloved who stays at home to a pair of compasses in the poem. Now he says that one is a person who travels for his beloved, and the other one is staying at home, and they're pair of compasses. You know, the compass we use for directions. So forbidding mourning, that is, do not cry. That person is emotional inside, still the person is not crying. If they be two, they are two so, as stiff twin compasses are two. The thigh sole, the fixed foot, makes no show to move but doth, if the other do. Their firmness makes my circle just. Now he's showing so much of emotions here when the two beloved people are separating. John Donne is passionately witty and wittily passionate. My God. Real compliment for him. Leishman is impressed by Donne's poetry that he considers him the monarch of wit. So another poet named as Leishman, he was actually impressed by Donne's poetry and he gave him a title that is monarch of wit. That means he's so witty in his work. Carew says in his elegy on Donne, here lies a king that ruled as he thought fit, the universal monarchy of wit. So these lines are written for Donne by Carew, the poet. He actually said that John Donne was the king who ruled for all the witty ideas that he put into his poetry. Okay, the finest illustration of Donne's wit is the flea. The flea is another poetry that he's written. Too much wit. He has used his witty behavior and thinking in that poetry. This flea is you, and I am this. Our marriage bed, the marriage temple is. So lovely lines. In the poem, The Sun Rising, that we are going to do, glorifying his beloved. So he has glorified his beloved. He, he employs metaphysical wit and extravagant conceits. So, metaphysical conceit is a characteristic that he has used in The Sun Rising. She is all states and all princey. I nothing else is. So he's saying she's almost the whole country, all the states and all the princely states, and I'm nothing in front of her. Use of colloquial speech is another element of Donne's metaphysical poetry. So he used another characteristic that is colloquial speech. This is especially apparent in the abrupt, dramatic, and conversational opening in many of his poems. For instance, in the poem, the, the canonization, he says, for God's sake, hold your tongue and let me love. That means he says that people, right? People who love each other. There are so many other people who keep talking about them. Oh, this happened and that happened to them and this, and they want to stop the two people from coming together. So he says that you all please hold your tongues and let me love how I want to love. So all emotions, love, thoughts, logic, laughter, everything is brought together in the poetry. Argumentative style. Now let's see how John Donne took the argumentative style. So this is the last thing that we'll be doing. Okay. Metaphysical poetry is a fusion of passionate feelings and logical arguments. So there are all logical arguments in it. Argumentative manner of speech is another element of John Donne's poetry. He often tries to prove his statements through very solid arguments. So he just does not want to portray something on the people and just put them on it. He tries to bring out arguments. He often tries to prove his statements through very solid arguments. Following are some examples of his poems where he has used argumentative style. If our two loves be one, or thou and I, that is you and I, love is so alike that none does alike, none can die, the good morrow again. Now let's see another example of argumentative style. If yet I have not all your love, dear, I shall never have it all. So there he's showing that if I do not have everything of your love, then I mean I will never have it because you have it all. Lovers infiniteness. They who one another keep alive, never parted be. So people who keep one another alive can never be parted. Sweetest love, I do not go, is the name of the poetry. Let's see another example. Since you and I sigh one other's breath, whose sighs most is cruelest, and haste the other's death, a valediction of weeping. This is another poetry. Let's see, I think this is the last one. Yes. Last example of argumentative style. Love me that I may die the gentler way. Hate me because your love is too great for me. So he's showing that if you love me, I will die very proper, I mean, in a peaceful manner. If you hate me, because your love is too great for me. Your love is so much that if you cannot love me, you hate me. To let me live, oh, love and hate me too. So if you want me living, love me as well as hate me. The prohibition. So a very wonderful poetry, the prohibition. You can go on YouTube or on Google and read this poetry, and also, yeah, you can read this poetry on Google. It's very lovely. So in the next videos, we'll be doing these paradoxes of John Donne. I mean, paradox, what all John Donne also added in his poetries, examples of paradox, and all what all figures of speech and expressions did he use in his poetries. We'll be doing in the next video. By the time, take care of yourself, enjoy your Christmas and your New Year's, and keep tuned with us on the videos and keep learning new things every day. Thank you so